Welcome back to What You Will Learn. My name is Adam Ashton.
And my name is Adam Jones. Today we're taking you through the best bits of the defining decade by Meg J. Why your 20s matter and how to make the most of it.
Why your 20s matter and how to make the most of it, mate. How old are you?
29 and 360 or so days, I guess.
No, well, you're about to hit 30 this week, so I just wanted to read this book just before you left your 20s, just to make sure that you made the most of them. How do you reckon you went?
Might have a lot of shit to do in the next 5 days. I think I did all right, mate. I'll give myself about a 6.5, 7.
Oh, no.
First half of my 20s, probably a negative 6. And then the second half came home a bit stronger.
Nice. Too good. Well, Meg J says that the key lesson is that your 20s matter. You know, everywhere people are thinking, oh, your 20s don't matter so much. It's just the beginning. It's still time to have fun. You're only just finding your feet in the world. You can sort of put off some of the major things until your 30s. But she says that 2/3 of your lifetime wage growth happens in the first 10 years of your career. More than half the people are married, or at least they're dating or living with their future partner by age 30. And your personality changes more in your 20s than in any other period of time in your life.
She says 80% of your life's defining moments are going to happen by the time you hit mid-30. I think that is the case for a lot of people. If they went to university, it's graduation, it's finding that first partner, it's marriage, it's buying your first asset or a house or anything like that. So a lot of your big moments happen in this period.
That's it. Meg says that this book, whilst it's pitched at people in their 20s, it's also very important for people who are either parents of 20-somethings or teachers or coaches or mentors or bosses of 20-somethings or anybody who was 20 once in their life, which I guess is a good way to sell a book. It's not just for 20-year-olds, it's for everybody.
Bit of a shoehorn, that. She says that, but I think it really is just for people in their 20s.
This is, I'll throw myself under the bus here. And Jones, man, if you think back to season 3, the word serendipity was used a lot just after you read The Black Swan. And then season 4, the word optionality, I reckon you used every second episode as well. I reckon season 5 could be my turn. I reckon the intention or intentionality is a word that I reckon could come up a lot for me. I really like that idea of intentionality that came out of this book. So if you've heard me saying it a lot recently, or you'll be hearing me say it a lot in the future, it's thanks to Big Meg J.
Yeah, interesting. Honestly, I don't remember what the word serendipity really means.
It's as soon as you read Black Swan, I reckon...
Positive serendipity, I understand that, but serendipity by itself?
I reckon 9 of the next 10 episodes after the Black Swan, you said serendipity.
So it is the critical period of your life. In work, the jobs we have in our 20s can be the most professionally and economically consequential jobs we'll ever have. In terms of love, our relationship choices in our 20s are pivotal. And in brain and body, the brain is still developing into the 20s. So the wiring we're putting in now sets up for adulthood. And we hit peak fertility rates as well. Not me being a male, females.
There was a story of a young woman named Helen. She went to visit Meg J, who is a counsellor specialising in 20-somethings. And Helen was going through what she called an identity crisis. Straight after high school, Helen had given up everything. She moved to Indonesia. She worked in a yoga retreat. She was out there seeking inspiration. She didn't know what she wanted to do with her life, so she said, I'm looking for this lightning bolt of intuition. At the time, her friends sort of envied her casual lifestyle because they'd all gone straight to the real world and hit corporate jobs, and they wished they could have this fun-loving lifestyle hanging out in Indonesia. But she realized that when she hit her late 20s, the friends that used to envy her were now pitying her. She felt totally lost and she had no idea what to do next.
Got another story here of a man named Erik Erikson. So he's a blonde-haired German dude whose father left when he was a baby. On his 3rd birthday, his mother married a local doctor and he was raised in a Jewish tradition. So he felt really out of place. At the temple, he was teased for just being a bit too pale, and at school, he was teased for being Jewish. So after high school, he travelled around Europe, vagabonding, sleeping under bridges, looking for inspiration, begging for food, wanted to be an artist. Then later in life, he got his shit together and he wrote a bunch of books and he ended up winning a Pulitzer Prize. So Erik Erikson here has got a very different story to Helen, and he's the one who coined the term identity crisis back in 1950.
So they're two very similar paths up till this point, but it was at this critical juncture where Eric's life took a turn. He got his shit together and went on to do some pretty amazing things. And Meg J was telling Helen that it's about these critical things that you do early. So when Eric was 25, he started teaching at a school. When he was 26, he started training. He went back to college to study. He met some influential people. By 29, he'd earned his degree in psychoanalysis. In his 30s, he moved to the USA. He taught at Harvard, Yale, Berkeley. He wrote several books. And so at this time of identity crisis, he actually started doing things. He wasn't just floating around looking for inspiration. He realized he needed a bit of intentionality about his life.
Yeah, you get a little excited when you say that word now as well. It frightens me a little bit. That's okay.
That's one of, I reckon, probably 6 or 7 that will come during this episode.
Yeah, I'll look forward to them. So the identity crisis hit, and then there's 2 different ways you can react from it all. But the ones who take the time to explore and also had the nerve to make commitments at this time, they're the ones who construct the strong identities that are going to help them going forward. You got higher self-esteems and more persevering, and you're more realistic.
So Helen had been doing the first part of that equation. She'd been exploring and trying to work out what she liked, but she missed out on that second part of the equation, which is taking a few risks, making a few commitments along the way. So for Eric, he made that commitment where he decided that he wanted to teach, and then he decided that he wanted to study, whereas Helen was still floating in the exploring phase. Ultimately, you need to start somewhere. No one can expect the perfect job straight out of college. Generally, it's probably going to start with a lower level job, something you think that you're going to be interested in. And from there, by actually experimenting and trying things out, that's when you truly start to understand yourself and build a bit of an identity for yourself. You know, throwing back to the book Range, the true understanding of yourself and your match quality, which he said, it's not from introspecting, it's not from sitting there and thinking, what do I want to do with my life? It's from actually getting out there, making a commitment, maybe in this case, starting a low-level job and trying it out, rather than just thinking about it.
So after seeing Meg J, this is what Helen did. She went out there, she got an admin job, she was working as an assistant in an office, she was doing a good job, she worked hard, she learned things and developed her skills. And one day, she was lucky that a movie director spent a few weeks working in her office, and she liked Helen, even though she's working as an admin person. This guy, he liked her work ethic a lot and thought she'd be great as a cinematography assistant. And now Helen, she's working in LA on big movies.
A few years later, Helen bumped into Meg, and she actually had a couple of interesting things to say. Helen said that I would have never believed it, but not a single person asked me about my GPA or what school I went to. All of those things were out the window once I actually started working and developing a bit of capital and a bit of identity for myself. Helen said that she wished she'd done more during her first few years. She wished she'd pushed herself to take some more risks, develop a wider range of skills, explore a wider range of jobs, and ultimately she wished she'd experimented more while she was younger and made a few more commitments.
Yeah, I really like these ideas of both exploration and commitment. I think a lot of people out there, including myself for, say, 20 to 25, it's just all about exploration, right? Just going out there, traveling the world, partying, just doing new things and new experiences, which I think's got a lot of utility in itself, right? It's a good time to do it because you're not carrying some of the weights and the burdens that you do that are put on you as you get older. But at the same time, if you do it wanderlessly without any medium to long-term commitment, you might just waste your whole 20s and then end up in a very bad situation.
I think 20-somethings feel a lot of pressure that they need to work it all out, and they end up thinking about what they want to do with their life. But this thinking is ultimately very unproductive. The quote from the book says, you can't think your way through life. The only way to figure it out is to actually do something.
Meg says that 20-somethings are not brain damaged, but their brain isn't fully developed yet. I think some 20-somethings are getting brain damage a lot of weekends. But what she's meaning is that the frontal lobe of the brain is just still in the development phase. In your 20s, you're really pleasure-seeking and your emotional brain is running a lot of the show. As you get older, in your 30s, all of a sudden your forward-thinking frontal lobe develops, and that's a lot more of your rationality that comes to the forefront.
I know Joe Rogan talks about this a fair bit, doesn't he? About how that young 20-somethings, their frontal lobe isn't fully developed. I didn't realize that I was still, until very recently, brain deficient in a sense. She says that the frontal lobe is the area of the brain that's responsible for projecting future consequences from present actions. So it's sort of this mental simulation that we go through. We weigh up the pros and cons of any action that we take, and it provides a bit of an override for any socially unacceptable behavior that we're thinking of doing. So that's when you're a fully fledged adult. When you're a young adult in your early 20s, you're missing that part.
Oh, 100%. You've done some stupid shit. I remember once when I was in Morocco, right, and I was got a donkey up to this top of the mountain where you jump off this 13-meter cliff jump. And and I knew there was rocks around. So I thought, you always assume that the rocks are the closest to the mountain, so you got to jump out really far. So I got to the top of the mountain, or the top of the jump, and then the guy was trying to speak to me, and he's like, yeah, just do, and I'm like, yeah, no, I know what to do, mate. And, there's my emotional brain kicking in, and I thought, fuck it, and I just launched off. No. And then the rocks, it turned out, were far away from the cliff, not close to it.
Jump close.
So I jumped on the rocks, and luckily, so it was about shoulder height, and luckily my momentum forward meant my heels skidded out.
Oh!
But still,
no, but then you would have slid backwards and your head would have...
No, I was like the right bit. If the force went through my body, I would have had my back broken and died and everything.
Oof.
Anyway, I was on a stretcher, had to jump on a donkey to hire a donkey really to ride me back through down the mountains again, and then got onto an ambulance where they didn't speak any English and had to bribe the hospital to x-ray. Anyway, it was just a story of it. It's just so many times in your 20s. Thinking back then, I'm still in my 20s actually. Still doing stupid shit to the not same extent. But yeah, it's hard. You make decisions not based on what's going to come down to 10 or 20 years down the track.
Correct. Oh man, that's too funny. Man, I've actually got a similar one that didn't happen to me. I don't know if I've done anything that wild, but my brother Nigel did. And it was very, very similar. And that we were at a waterfall, went to jump off, landed on the rocks. We were in Papua New Guinea. And there was like no one around. But then magically out of nowhere, like 20 locals just came and helped us, carried him back up the waterfall. It was pretty legendary. But yeah, 20-year-olds doing stupid shit.
I used to have this saying, and I think it links in, let future Adam worry about that, which would apply to you as well.
Yeah.
But the early 20s, you'd have a big night or anything like that. You'd blow all your cash.
Yeah.
You'd borrow money or whatever, and you think, I'll just let fucking future Adam worry about it. Turns out, like, future Adam does have to worry about it. A few years you have to deal with it.
And that's a big issue with the 20-somethings is that we're always putting it off till later. We think the 20s is the time for fun. The 30s, that's when we can get serious. We can work our life out later. But obviously it's important to get started early. The earlier you can get started and making some serious inroads into some of these things, the better off you're going to be.
There's a story here of a French speleologist. Don't know what that is, to be honest.
I actually had to Google. I assumed it was to do with time, but it's cave. People studying caves.
Oh, that's an interesting profession. But the cave researcher went down into a cave, as you'd imagine, and he was isolated from all external sources of light, sound, temperature to get an understanding of how the human brain understands time without these external signals. So it's basically just guessing how much time elapsed after being underground for about 25 days. And it turns out that he was actually down there for 2 months. So he was what? He was off by 60%. Yeah. So time passed more than twice as fast as he guessed.
That's pretty wild. You pop down to a cave, think, oh yeah, I've been down here for 3 and a bit weeks. You pop up and it's been 2 months.
You'd hope you got compensated for that research. It's pretty tough.
Yeah, exactly. Well, man, basically what he's saying is, where did all that time go? And that's a very specific example where you can't understand time. But very often, we're already in the late into the second half of the year and we're thinking, man, this year's almost over. Where did the time go? Or you're getting close to 30. You're thinking, where did all that time go? I've got my 10-year school reunion this year. And I think, man, no way it's been 10 years since I was at high school. But the time just seems to pass by so quickly. And we often think it's going slower than it actually is.
So back in the day, school and uni, they're nicely packaged into terms and semesters and year levels. And when you enter the real world, it doesn't have these same obvious markers of time. It just keeps going. And because of that, it does seem to go faster.
We've got a present bias where we discount the future and think mostly about the present. We don't worry about saving for the future because we think we've still got plenty of time to save up. We don't worry about improving our skills. We think we've got plenty of time to get a better job later. But of course, time moves so much quicker than we actually realize.
She's got a study here of the impact of virtual reality, of seeing yourself in the future and how much you actually put away for your retirement savings. So the first group, they were just going through their day-to-day lives and like everyone, they put away $73 per week. But there was a huge difference when they put a virtual reality headset on a group of 25-year-olds. And in that virtual reality headset, they saw older versions of themselves going through the future. So basically, when you're seeing that, you realize that the future is actually coming to you and future Adam and 20 years from now, Adam, it's actually coming. So because of that, they're a bit more compassionate to that future person and themselves. And they ended up putting away $178 a week. So that's 2.5 times the amount.
Yeah, exactly. Over and over, we think that we've got infinite time for adulting. We think we can do all the real important stuff later. But bringing a thing like this where you actually see yourself in the future, you realize, actually, it's not that far away and I better start looking after myself now. There was one important story here about a young woman named Rachel. She was a bartender at a restaurant. She was initially studying public health. She was doing a master's, but she dropped out. She didn't like the field of health research, so she was working at a bar just to fill the time before she decided what to do. She saw all these fancy lawyers coming in their suits for their long lunches, getting drinks, and she thought, man, all these young professionals, they're actually not that much better than me. They're not that much smarter than me. I could easily do what they're doing. Maybe I should become a lawyer as well. She admitted that she was hating the work in the restaurant, but she went and saw Meg J for a counselling session and she said, hey, I think I want to become a lawyer. All these lawyers, they're not that much better than me. I could do it too. And Meg said, look, there's a couple of important differences between you and between them. Even though you're the same age, they have done a couple of things that you haven't done yet. Firstly, they've studied for a couple of years to do the LSAT, the law school admissions test. Secondly, they've gone through a couple of years of law school. Then they've done a whole bunch of important things. They've got some reference letters. They've built their networks. They've put in job applications. They've done interviews. They've done summer internships. So even though Rachel thought it was a short road between where she was now and becoming a lawyer, there was all these things along the way that she didn't realize were still ahead of her.
So Rachel here, she's 26 years old and she's judging all these people around her. So she was thinking, all right, I'm going to be a lawyer one day as well, but she never really put a timeline to how her future's going to unfold. She said she wanted to start law school before 30, right? So in the next 4 years. And simultaneously, she said there's no way she wants to work in a bar when she's 30 years old. But she never really intentionally, there you go,
there you go, you got one.
Put these things together, right? If she's going to go to law school at 30, she's going to be working in a bar not only when she's 30, but probably when she's 35 years old.
Yeah, if you've got 1 year of studying and then 3 years of law school and then another year to pass the bar, and then you're probably looking for your first job when you're like 36. And then when you're doing the math here that it's taking this long to study, if she's putting off this, Meg was saying, okay, well, is family something you want to do? Do you want to have kids? And she says, yeah, I do, but again, that's something for future Rachel to worry about. I can do that later. Well, Meg was saying, okay, well, if you're thinking, if you want to have your first kid, do you want to be studying whilst you have your first kid, or are you going to have it in your first year of work? So either you got to wait until after you're established in your career until you can have a child. And Rachel says, well, I don't really want to be an older mother. So Meg is saying, look, these timelines aren't adding up. If you're going to put it off and put off having a family, put off having kids, put off starting your career, put off studying, everything's going to come crashing at some point in time. You really need to start doing all of these things now. Start getting serious now. She says that having a life in your 30s doesn't mean starting your life in your 30s. It means getting started now so that you can prepare yourself.
So she says this defining decade in our 20s, that's the time where we need to create our own sense of time. Don't just let it just wither away. Be very be very intentional, there you go, with how you actually use this time, because your 30s are going to come before you know it, and there's going to be these additional obligations that are all going to come rushing in at once, and then you're probably not going to have the life that you thought you could have had.
David Brooks, a political and cultural commentator, said that society is structured to distract people from the decisions that have a huge impact on happiness in order to focus attention on the decisions that have marginal impact on happiness. He's saying that the most important decisions that we have to make are things like who we marry. But of course, there's no university course on how to choose a partner. He says we need to go down market to hear about things like marriage being discussed. We have to watch the talk shows and the reality TV. There's no upmarket mediums talking about marriage. University education, school classes, books, literature. There isn't that much marriage talk. It's just on the reality TVs like The Bachelor.
100%. I think Big David's onto something here. If you think about our podcast, we've done a couple hundred episodes. Not a hell of a lot around.
Are we upmarket or down market?
I don't know.
I think we're upmarket in a down market sort of a way.
Yeah, I hope so. But it is something that it's got huge leverage and impact on your overall happiness and where your life's going to go. But yeah, we just aren't intentional. Fuck, I'm using this word more than you now. About what we're going to be doing with this decision.
The decision of what who your life partner is going to be is intrinsically linked to everything else you do in life. We think that the school that we choose to go to is such a big decision, but really it pales in comparison to your romantic partner. Even if you get divorced from this person, you're still probably going to be linked over the long term, whether it's financially or having to shuttle the kids back and forth every other weekend. The choice of romantic partner is one of the most important decisions you could ever make.
And again, it comes back to this theme of bringing your decisions up front. She thinks that you need to get picky now rather than picky later. And if you start getting picky now, you'll be able to adjust your criteria. So the best terms of pickiness that she's talking about is being picky on the things that are going to matter in 10 or 20 or 30 years down the track. Not the little picky things now where, at the bar, the partner does something that annoys you, might do a pop off at the... I don't know where my brain went there. That wasn't Corey, it might have been an ex-partner. But picky on things like that, that's not a big deal. It's just a fart in the wind.
Deal.
Think about the things in 20 years' time, right? They're going to be the big ones. Things about like the in-law, the family, are they going to be the type of family that you want to be entering your life? Financially, how you go with that, and all sorts of other factors, which we'll get into.
Yeah, that's it. We're not talking about picky in the sense of the little things that might annoy you slightly. We're talking about the big picture stuff. And as you mentioned, that you need to have those criteria set now and start testing it out, because you might need to change your criteria a little bit. There was a story about a young bloke named Eli who was sent by his girlfriend to go and see Meg, because the girlfriend said, "Mate, you need to go and sort your shit out. Go and see Meg."
Suck, Eli.
And the big problem here was that the girlfriend thought that Eli was partying too much, and Eli thought that the girlfriend was too quiet. She wasn't putting herself out there. She was focusing too much on her uni work. She wasn't meeting new friends. If they went over to his family's place and they were playing board games, she didn't really join in the fun. So they were just very different on these two very important things. And so I guess they both had to realize, is this something that's vitally important to us? How important is that in the big scheme of things?
So the advice from Meg here is that the two need to be in like before they could be in love. So they had been alike in many ways that mattered, and you have to genuinely like the other person, and often these come hand in hand. So Aristotle says we like people who are like us. So Cialdini had this as one of his weapons of influence as well, liking.
Yeah, we often hear that opposites attract, but generally the opposites attract for those one-off hookups, because you want to get a bit of variety. You want to feel as if maybe something you are hoping or wishing that you could be. You see somebody else with those traits and you think, I want a piece of that. But that's generally for the short-term stuff. The longer-term stuff, you need to be more similar rather than more different. We don't need to be exactly alike, but we just can't be polar opposites, like Eli and his girlfriend. One was a full party goer, one was a full workaholic. They were two different people.
Absolutely. So the simplest and most widely used model of how you are like the other person is the Big Five, which is pretty much everywhere in psychology, but it's something that hasn't really come up on this podcast, but it is everywhere, yeah?
Yeah, I can't believe we haven't done it before. You see it come up a lot. The Big Five personality traits spell out the word ocean. It's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
So if you look at openness, if you're low in this, it means you're very practical, you're conventional, you prefer routine, you're skeptical and rational. If you're high on openness, you're open to new experiences and trying new things. You're intellectually curious, you're creative, you're imaginative, you're adventurous, and you're insightful.
For conscientiousness, if you're low, you're relaxed about rules and standards, you're easygoing, you're careless, can be spontaneous, can be prone to addiction. If you're high conscientiousness, you're much more disciplined, efficient, organized, responsible, dutiful, self-directed, and thorough.
The third is extroversion. If you're low on this, you like solitary time, you're shy, you're reserved, you're energized by being alone, you're quiet, independent, cautious, and aloof. If you're high in extroversion, it means you're outgoing, enthusiastic, active, novelty-seeking, you get energy from interactions with others, and you're very talkative.
The fourth is agreeableness. If you're low in agreeableness, you can be seen as uncooperative, antagonistic, suspicious. Sometimes you have trouble understanding others. If you're high in agreeableness, you're cooperative, kind, affectionate, friendly, compassionate, trusting, compliant, and understanding.
And the fifth is neuroticism. And if you're low in this, you're not easily bothered, you're secure, you take things at face value, you're emotionally resilient. And if you're higher in neuroticism, you're tense, you're moody, you're anxious, you're sensitive, you're prone to sadness, you worry a lot, and you're quick to see the negative.
I don't think
that's not a good one.
so I think it's like you don't need to like do a 300 questionnaire to work out what you are. I think just by hearing some of those, you'll quickly work out where you sort of fall. It doesn't matter exactly where you are, but you can get a good taste. Are you sort of low? Are you high? Are you somewhere in the middle? Are you in the middle but tending towards the high end? And you can get a bit of a picture of who you are and who the other people are around you.
Yeah, you can't be exactly the same. So opposites don't necessarily attract to its fullest extent, but, a bit of differences here and there, absolutely okay.
Yeah, I think I was just watching a Jordan Peterson video, and he talked about this as well, not obviously in the sense of 20-year-olds, but he was saying that for relationships, you want to be at similar ends of the spectrum. If you're both on opposite ends of all 5 things, you're probably not going to get along too well. You need a bit of difference so that you can learn to have empathy for other types of people. You can get the benefits of both. But if you're one is full extroversion and one is full introversion, or one is full high openness and one is full low on the openness, that could spell trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the big takeaway with this book is to be intentional. Bring all those decisions up front. Don't just let future Adam worry about it too much, because someday that person's going to come, and if you don't do the right things and plant the right seeds early, then things are going to suck for you in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Big quote from Tony Robbins. I don't know if he probably ripped it off someone else, but I attribute it to Tony Robbins. He says that we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we could do in a decade. So you might think, I can put that off, I can do that later, I can sort out my career later, I can sort out my relationships later, I can get healthy later. But really, if you start now, you'd be amazed at what you could achieve in a decade.
I think Tony actually, his 3 years. I thought it was...
Oh, is it 3?
Yeah.
Tony can do a lot of shit though.
I'd say I'd back up the 3. For me, going a bit more self-analysis again, I was a big party animal, drugs, getting locked up for getting naked and doing wild kind of shit till 25, and I did a big turnaround then. And I think things started to turn around for me after about 2 to 3 years. But yeah, it wasn't 1 year.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily.
And I think that's a good takeaway for anyone. Obviously, this book is specifically targeted towards 20-year-olds or 20-somethings, but I think anyone can take that same advice. If you're not exactly where you want to be, you got to realize, start making a few decisions. That it's not going to happen instantly overnight, but you'll be surprised at how quickly you can turn things around. Mate, with your 30th birthday this week, is there anything you're thinking about changing or doing as a result of this book, thinking that your 20s are over, you're entering a new decade?
Not really, man.
Fair enough.
Just gonna
anything you're gonna get
keep
intentional
plugging
about?
away.
Yeah,
Just keep plugging away. Right. I think we've read enough books really to learn that the importance of intentionality, and I think the big one, which is a more extrapolated version of this, is thinking about your mortality. So she's saying about 30s and 40s. I think for all of us, and this is what books like 7 Habits get into, is beginning with the end in mind. Realize that your time on earth is limited. And I think from that perspective, it brings the intentionality and decisions up front. So in the last moments of your life, you're not going to be looking back in regret.
Yeah, very true. Man, I had one specific one from one of the chapters that we didn't touch on, but she was talking about in terms of doing the math. I think I was always thinking family and kids is something I want to do, but I was always thinking I'll do that later. She was saying you think you're busy now. You think you got a lot on now. You think you got a lot on your plate. You don't have time for kids. That's not going to get any better. When you're hitting your 30s, you're more advanced in your career. You're going to have a lot more things to do. So I don't think the advice wasn't go and have kids now, but it's definitely something to not just put off to the future.
We're going to have a little Astro running around in a little while.
Nothing too soon, but I need to get intentional about that, that's for sure.
You'd be a good dad, man.
Thanks, mate, and happy birthday.
How many more years you got left? 3.
Of a kid?
No, 20s.
Of the 20s. Yeah, 2.5.
You got time to get your shit together.
I can put that off till later. Jones, man, happy birthday, mate. A big happy 30th birthday to the great man, Adam Jones. I don't know what the 30th birthday is, if that's you're on the other side of the hill now, or if you're at the top of the hill making the most of every opportunity, or I'm sure you would like to frame it that you're still on the way up, which I think is a good way to frame it as well. Mate, it has been an absolute blast. The last 4.25 years or 4.5 years, we've been doing this podcast, reading books, seeing each other once or twice a week to share our favorite lessons, discuss what we liked and didn't like about the book. Sometimes have a few wars about what gets into an episode and what doesn't, but then turning those into a podcast episode, sharing that with people, and gradually seeing more and more people listening over time. Looking forward to the next 4.5 years. Hope it's a great day, mate. Have a special one, 30th. Take some time and enjoy that one. And anybody who wants to give the Jones man a little happy birthday on the social media this week, I'm sure he would. I'm sure he'd love to see those filtering through.